Um, a very good morning again. Thank you for joining us back. So we're going to start the next talk. Our next speaker is Dr. Jasli Aziz. So I want to give a bit of introduction about Dr. Jasli. So Dr. Jasli has established himself in the field of biomedical science and immunology. He's a senior lecturer at the Faculty of Dentistry, University Malaya, where he has focused his work on unraveling the intricate connections between oral health and overall well-being. As the General Secretary of the Malaysian Society of Oral Microbiologists and Oral Immunologists, MySoMOI, he aims to also spread the findings in the field beyond our university and to general population. His research spans across the realms of molecular biology, microbiology, and immunology, with a particular focus on elucidating the molecular and microbial associations between periodontitis and rheumatoid arthritis, exploring immune responses linked to periodontal health and disease. And fascinating world of bacteriophage populations dynamics in the oral health and disease. Please join me in welcoming our speaker on stage to present his talk on the impact of oral health on systemic disease. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Krishna, for the introduction. So before I begin, can I just get a rough estimate, just a show of hands, how many here are from faculty of medicine, medical background? We got a few dental background. I know we got a few. Oh yeah, our new postgrads are here. Welcome. Faculty of pharmacy, is anyone here? No, okay, so mostly medical and dental. Okay, so the reason why I asked is because when we talk about health, usually we and people outside of academia, people outside of healthcare, we all tend to have our own associations that we make. So when we talk about health, some people may think about obesity, some people think about cardiovascular health, some people think about diabetes, mental health. So there are many different aspects of health, many different layers of health. But despite this, all these different dimensions of health, they are actually related. All right, so in our body, we have our skeletal system, circulatory system, pulmonary system, digestive system, and everything. So we learn about these in class separately. But in reality, when it comes to healthcare, everything is related. We can't really look at one particular aspect of health in isolation. And that also goes for oral health. Okay, so just like I'm sure everyone knows driving in the Klang Valley, if Federal Highway is jammed, for example, if there's a big accident there, it's not just Federal Highway that's jammed, NKVE will be jammed, NPE will be jammed, KESAS will be jammed. So when one system is affected, there's a very good chance that every system will be affected in one way or another. So that's what I'm trying to deliver here today and share some findings, not my own, but from the scientific community in general, on how oral health can impact systemic health. So one of the things that I think many people overlook is that our mouth is actually the biggest opening into our body from the environment. So usually everything that goes into our mouth, food, water, even whenever we breathe in and out, we always have additional stowaways that come along with whatever it is we're ingesting in the forms of environmental contaminants. We also have bacteria, viruses, right, all kinds of different stowaways. So because of this, all these things that come into our oral cavity then have the possibility to spread to the rest of the body. And this is why we can see that oral health is actually tightly associated to systemic health. So whatever happens in the oral cavity, it's not isolated and it doesn't just stay in the oral cavity. There's always a chance that whatever happens in your mouth can also affect the other systems of your body. And so I'll be focusing particularly on the oral microbiome, on the microbial aspect of it. Okay, so possibly most people here know, but the general population may not know that we actually have more than 700 different species of microorganisms just in our mouth. Okay, we have our tongue surface, tooth surfaces, we have our gum surfaces, we have the pockets in our teeth, pockets in our gums. So all these different surfaces are homes to different kinds of microorganisms, and collectively they form our oral microbiome. And this collection of species, they are polymicrobial in nature, which you can guess from the 700 different species, and they form a structurally and functionally organized matrix, which is known as our dental plaque. So this dental plaque is also known as a biofilm, where we have different layers in the structure, all with different nutritional components, different pH, different oxygen availabilities, and all these different environments lead to the formation of colonies of different bacteria and different viruses. So naturally, in healthy conditions, these residents of our oral microbiome, they protect us from invasion, from invading microorganisms that can cause disease, known as pathogens. And this phenomenon, where the residents in our oral microbiome protect us from invasion, is known as colonization resistance. So just how we would defend our home from intruders, or how a nation would defend its borders from invading forces, the organisms in our mouth also do the same by protecting us from pathogenic infection. But sometimes that doesn't fully pan out, and so we do, on occasion, suffer from invasion by pathogens. And this invasion can disrupt the homeostasis, or it can disrupt the balance in our oral microbiome. And this disruption is known as a microbial dysbiosis, or a microbial shift, where the oral microbiome shifts from one in a healthy state to one which can be pathogenic in nature, one that can cause disease. And so whenever this dysbiosis happens, leading to an oral disease of any kind, this oral disease will then lead to physiological changes, immunological changes, and so on. And these changes can leak out from the oral cavity and contribute to the formation or the increase of severity of existing systemic diseases, or it can even lead to the formation of a systemic disease. So talking about different oral diseases, here we have three of the most commonly known, or perhaps even three most common types of oral diseases worldwide. Of course, we have oral cancer, where the World Health Organization reported in 2020, a few years ago, we had almost 400,000 new cases and just under 180,000 new deaths from oral cancer in 2020. Caries, much more prevalent. About 2 billion adults worldwide suffered from caries in the year 2020, and half a billion cases involving children. Periodontitis, which is an inflammation of the gums. This one perhaps is a little less known compared to oral cancer and caries, but it is not any less common in the global population, where we have about 1 billion cases of severe periodontitis. And now you'll note that I mentioned the word severe here, and that's because periodontitis has several stages. Even gingivitis is considered a form of periodontal disease. So gingivitis, mild periodontitis, they all can lead to severe periodontitis. And in the year 2020, the World Health Organization reported about 1 billion cases involving adults. So for the purposes of this short talk, I will be focusing a lot more on periodontitis and how it leads, or how it is associated with systemic health for several reasons. So firstly, periodontitis, it is an infection-driven chronic inflammation. Infection-driven meaning that one of the main components of periodontal inflammation is bacterial in nature, or even viral in nature. And it is one of the most prevalent oral diseases worldwide. If you consider the milder forms of periodontitis, gingivitis, and the severe form, you'll see that it is very prevalent. So even bleeding gums when you are brushing your teeth is an early sign of periodontitis, or it's an indicator of periodontitis. And usually, whenever we talk about an association between oral health and systemic health, it is usually in relation to periodontal health. And I will just explain why in the next slide here. So if we look at periodontal health and any other dimensions of systemic health, we will see that there are several different links between the two. So periodontal health and systemic health, they tend to share several different risk factors. We can also find associations between the two in the form of oral bacteria. So while these bacteria may originate from the oral cavity, they can also be found in systemic health. And also cytokine reservoir, which are basically proteins that control and modulate inflammation, among other things, in our system. So one of the layers of systemic health that are affected by oral health or periodontitis is cardiovascular disease. So cardiovascular disease, as we all know, is a very wide range of diseases associated with the heart. And our oral cavity, or what happens in our oral cavity, can actually affect cardiovascular health. So as you can see in this example here, this paper, which was from very early, just this year, periodontal disease associated with the risk of cardiovascular disease independent of sex, and meta-analysis. So there have been a lot of studies which have associated periodontal health and cardiovascular disease. And several of the findings from these papers, I've shared some of them here. So for example, periodontal pathogens, in other words, the pathogens which can lead to the development of periodontitis, they can cause platelet aggregations, which can lead to thrombus formation. So thrombus is a blood clot. So we have found, not we, but the scientific community has found that the pathogens which are responsible or contribute to periodontal health can also lead to thrombus formations, which can lead to cardiovascular diseases. Another one is periodontal pathogens can also be found in atheromas, which are fatty deposits in our blood vessels. And lastly, bacterial LPS. LPS stands for lipopolysaccharides. So these are basically virulent factors from bacteria which cause disease. They can stimulate inflammation, and this inflammation could also contribute to any pre-existing cardiovascular diseases. Periodontitis and diabetes is also a very common link which has been studied in the past. And it's not just one way, meaning it's not just periodontitis which leads to diabetes, but it's also the other way around. It's a two-way street. And this summary from that paper shows how several components of periodontitis, for example, you have your risk factors in smoking, and you also have your subgingival biofilm, which is the microbial colonies in your subgingiva. They can lead to dysregulated inflammatory responses and also an increase in pro-inflammatory cytokine secretion, as well as matrix metalloproteinases. So these can also contribute towards diabetes. Similarly, diabetes also has several of its own risk factors and indicators which contribute to this inflammatory pathway, which can then also contribute to periodontitis. So it's a two-way street between periodontitis and diabetes, showing once again how oral health has a very strong influence on systemic health. And lastly, focusing on the research that me and my colleagues have been doing in the Faculty of Dentistry for a while, linking between periodontitis and rheumatoid arthritis. So you can see from this first paper here, periodontitis and rheumatoid arthritis, one aspect of health that we don't often think about is quality of life. So quality of life of our patients can be affected negatively depending on their oral health, periodontitis, And it can also be exacerbated if they also have rheumatoid arthritis, for example. Of course, there are also several molecular associations. Salivary and serum cathelicidin LL37. So these can also be associated to both periodontitis and rheumatoid arthritis, and they can also contribute to the severity of both. Several other mechanisms, for example, the concentration of metallothionein and zinc. They can also be involved in inflammation, contributing to several diseases, including periodontitis and rheumatoid arthritis. And if we look at the literature, we'll find that several papers have actually linked periodontitis and rheumatoid arthritis. It's not really something new. It's been studied for at least 2 decades already. But because we are constantly unveiling new associations between the two diseases, we have grounds for updating what we currently know between the two, which is why we can see this paper published just 3 years ago. And taking that into mind, I would like to highlight this paper published in Nature just a few years ago, talking about the links between periodontitis and rheumatoid arthritis. The etiology of RA is complex, and the list of molecular pathways linking periodontitis to RA outstrips our current knowledge. So even though this area of research, periodontitis and rheumatoid arthritis, even though it has been studied for at least 2 decades, we are still uncovering new associations between the two diseases. And this is something that I think can also be applied to other associations between oral health and systemic health, not just periodontitis and RA. So a couple of key takeaways that I would like to share before I end this short lecture. We need to constantly remember, and we also need to increase the awareness of people outside of healthcare, that oral health and systemic health are constantly related. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was in the Faculty of Dentistry in NUS, National University of Singapore. We went there with our first-year students, and their Vice Dean of Academic Affairs, Associate Prof. Dr. Wong, he gave us a lecture on preventive dentistry. And so to start his lecture, he asked our students, why do they think preventive dentistry is important? And so, of course, our students, they gave a few expected answers, saying that it's better to prevent than to cure. Economically, it makes more sense to prevent disease, so you don't have to treat it. For example, caries, periodontitis, and everything. But he was looking for one specific answer, which none of the students were able to give. And what he was looking for was that preventive dentistry is not just about preventing oral health, about preventing oral disease and maintaining oral health, but preventive dentistry is also important for maintaining systemic health, for maintaining bodily health. So even though the students learn in class specifically about preventive dentistry, in the wider scope of healthcare, preventive dentistry is also important to maintain bodily health, systemic health, not just oral health. Which leads to the final point that I wanted to ask everyone to take away, the importance of maintaining oral health to maintain holistic health. So it's not just to prevent caries, it's not just to protect your gum health, but it's also important to maintain systemic health as well. So thank you very much. Thank you for listening. If anybody would like to learn a little bit more about the research that I'm doing, you can visit my website. I'm also quite active on social media, and these are all work-related accounts. So no politics, no pictures of cats or food or anything. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Just.